You've been taught that control means strength, that if you just plan enough, push enough, predict enough, life will finally cooperate. But what if control isn't saving you? It's suffocating you. What if the more you force life to follow your script, the more you miss what was actually meant for you?
You've been told to take control of your life, plan it, execute it, dominate it. They told you that's where safety lies. In knowing, in preparing, in mastering every variable. But what they didn't tell you is that control is a beautiful prison, and you've been decorating the walls of it for years. You crave control not because you're strong, but because somewhere deep down, you still feel like chaos is waiting to devour you the second you let go. That if you stop micromanaging how others see you, what happens next, how quickly it happens, everything will fall apart. So you tighten your grip, you build schedules, rules, conditions, you predict conversations in your head, you rehearse responses, you analyze glances like they're chess moves. Not because you enjoy it, but because somewhere inside, a frightened voice whispers, "If I don't control this, I'll be hurt." It's not logic that drives your need to control. It's fear. Fear wearing a suit. Anxiety disguised as responsibility. You've turned your trauma into a productivity system. You've turned your hypervigilance into a personality. And the worst part, the world applauds you for it. They call you disciplined, focused, committed. They don't see the exhaustion underneath, the sleepless nights, the clenched jaw, the inner collapse you hide behind your perfect plans. But control doesn't bring peace. It breeds resistance. The more you try to make life obey you, the more it pushes back. You try to force someone to stay, they leave. You try to force success, you burn out. You try to force yourself to be okay and end up feeling more broken. Every time you demand life to bend to your terms, it responds with silence or chaos. And maybe that's not punishment. Maybe that's mercy. Because here's the truth you don't want to admit. Control is an illusion. Always has been. You never controlled the outcome. You only controlled your anxiety by pretending you did. You only distracted yourself from the terror of uncertainty. You wore control like armor, and now it's rusting into your skin. Ask yourself this. Has control ever actually delivered what it promised? Did clinging tighter ever make love stay? Did obsessing over timelines ever make things arrive faster? Or did it just make you miss the quiet signs life was trying to show you? The opportunities that came softly, not through effort, but through alignment. The moments of clarity you ignored because they didn't come wrapped in your checklist. You've been swimming against the current for so long, you forgot rivers were meant to carry you. You thought struggle meant meaning, but sometimes struggle just means misalignment. Sometimes pain isn't a lesson, it's a signal that your grip is too tight, that you're not listening. And if you're honest, you don't even want control. What you want is peace. What you want is to finally stop bracing for impact. What you want is to exhale without guilt. But your nervous system is still at war, and control is the only weapon it trusts. That's not your fault, but it is your responsibility now to question it. Because life, real, aligned, meaningful life, doesn't respond to control. It responds to presence. And presence is what gets strangled when control is in the room. You weren't born to manage outcomes. You were born to participate in something far bigger, far wiser, far more intricate than your fears can comprehend. And that something only speaks when you stop yelling over it with your plans. It only moves when you stop trying to move it. The real tragedy isn't that you can't control everything. It's that in trying, you've silenced your own ability to hear what's actually trying to reach you. Your intuition, your timing, the truth underneath all the noise. And maybe, just maybe, the first taste of freedom isn't in gaining more control, but in releasing it. But of course, this brings up another fear, a deeper one. If I stop controlling, won't I become passive? Won't I just let life walk over me? Let's talk about that next, because there's a world of difference between surrender and giving up. And most people, including you, have never been taught the difference. You hear the word surrender, and something in you recoils. It sounds like failure, like weakness, like giving up. And you've spent your whole life avoiding that feeling. You think, if I surrender, I lose. If I surrender, I'll become invisible, walked over, forgotten. But that's not surrender. That's passivity. And they are not the same. Passivity is rooted in fear. It is the collapse that comes when you've been hit too many times and have forgotten how to stand up. It is silence soaked in helplessness. Surrender, on the other hand, is rooted in clarity. It is the stillness that comes when you finally understand that not everything must be wrestled into place. Surrender is not weakness. It's strength that no longer needs to prove itself. Imagine a sailor caught in a storm. One path is to fight the wind, to tear at the sails, to scream at the sky, and try to force the ocean into calm. That's control. That's fear masquerading as bravery. But the other path, the wiser one, is to adjust the sails, to read the wind, to work with the forces larger than yourself. That's surrender. It's not passive. It's deeply participatory. It's intelligent. It's trusting. Because it knows something your ego refuses to accept. Not all power is loud. Surrender is not resignation. It is choosing to stop forcing things that don't want to be forced. It's no longer begging a door to open when your soul has already outgrown the room behind it. It's learning to distinguish between the noise of panic and the quiet voice of wisdom. And that wisdom, it rarely screams. It whispers. It nudges. But you can't hear it when you're gripping the steering wheel so tightly your knuckles go white. You've been taught to fight, to hustle, to push harder, scream louder, try again. And maybe some of that got you here, but it won't take you further. There comes a point in your life where force stops working, where every attempt to control just leads to more chaos, more delay, more inner resistance. That's when surrender knocks, and it doesn't ask for your fear. It asks for your trust. To surrender is to admit that you don't know everything, that you don't need to, that maybe life, whatever you believe it to be, has a rhythm far more intelligent than your panic. And maybe that rhythm isn't punishing you. Maybe it's protecting you from something you're too desperate to see clearly. But here's the uncomfortable part. To surrender means letting go of timelines, letting go of who you thought would stay, letting go of the version of success you rehearsed in your head every night before bed. It means making peace with the unknown. And there is nothing more terrifying to a mind addicted to certainty. But what's the alternative? More tension, more burnout, more pretending. You've tried forcing, and it drained you. You've tried controlling, and it isolated you. Isn't it time to try something else? Not to give up, but to let go. Because when you surrender, you're not stepping back from life. You're stepping into it. With eyes open, hands open, heart open. You're not abandoning effort. You're abandoning ego. You're not rejecting responsibility. You're rejecting the illusion that you can architect every outcome. And in that space, something incredible happens. You start to feel carried. not in a fantasy sense, but in a real, grounded, almost eerie way. Life begins to move without your constant interference. People show up, clarity emerges, things start aligning, not because you pushed harder, but because you finally got out of the way. And that's what we'll explore next. What actually happens when you stop forcing, because that's where everything begins to change. So what happens when you stop forcing? At first, silence. A terrifying, echoing silence. The kind that makes your hands twitch to grab the wheel again. Because control was a noise, a distraction. It gave you something to fix, to chase, to obsess over. And when it's gone, you're left face to face with something you forgot how to sit with. Yourself. But if you stay, if you don't flinch, if you let the silence stretch instead of scrambling to fill it, something shifts. Something small. Almost imperceptible, but real. The pressure in your chest loosens. Not because everything is fixed, not because the answers arrived on a silver platter, but because you finally stopped resisting what is. And when resistance leaves, space enters. Space for something truer to emerge. You start noticing things you never did before. The conversation you would have interrupted with over-explaining suddenly reveals what the other person truly meant. The problem you were trying to solve for weeks softens, and the solution appears not through effort, but in a flash of clarity on a quiet walk. You feel guided, not dragged. Call it intuition, call it clarity, call it grace. Whatever it is, it doesn't speak when you're forcing. It waits, patiently, until you quiet down enough to listen. You begin to enter what some call flow, not in a mystical sense, but in a deeply human, deeply grounded state of alignment. Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi described flow as the moment when your skill meets the challenge, and time seems to dissolve. But it's more than that. Flow is also what happens when your actions no longer fight your truth. When what you do is no longer rooted in fear, but in resonance. When life stops feeling like a war and starts feeling like a dance. Think of a person who let go of the relationship they were clinging to for years. Not because they stopped loving, but because they started listening. And within months, they found peace, not in another person, but in themselves. Then, unexpectedly, love showed up again. Better aligned, freer, gentler. Not because they chased it, but because they finally stopped chasing what was never meant to stay. Or think of the artist who abandoned the algorithm, who stopped trying to paint what would sell, and instead poured truth into the canvas. And suddenly, eyes found their work. Not because they tried harder, but because something real always finds its way. When you stop forcing, you stop swimming against life. You stop shouting over your own inner wisdom. And in that silence, you start to hear where you're actually being called. It's not always dramatic. Sometimes, it's as subtle as sleeping better, laughing more, feeling more yourself in a room without needing to impress anyone. Sometimes, it's the absence of urgency, the first deep breath you've taken in years that doesn't feel like borrowed air. And maybe the most beautiful part, you become more available to the present. You stop living 5 steps ahead in fear and 5 steps behind in regret. You show up, you listen, you respond instead of react. You start to trust that if something is meant for you, it will align. And if it doesn't, that's not your failure. That's your redirection. There is a strange, humbling peace in this. A soft power. The kind that doesn't chase, but attracts. The kind that doesn't scream, but is heard anyway. The kind of peace that doesn't beg for life to cooperate. Because it has finally started cooperating with life. And that leads us into the final shift, the one that makes all the difference. If control created tension and surrender created space, then alignment is where you learn how to live. Not by managing everything, but by learning how to listen. Let's talk about that next. Alignment doesn't scream. It doesn't rush in with neon signs or grand epiphanies. It whispers. A quiet yes in your body. A calm knowing in your chest. A decision that feels like coming home. Not because it's easy, but because it's true. To live in alignment is to stop negotiating with your gut. To stop editing yourself to fit spaces your soul has outgrown. It's a shift from, how can I control this, to what is this moment asking of me? And the answer doesn't always come in words. Sometimes it comes in stillness. Sometimes in grief. Sometimes in joy that feels undeserved. Living in alignment means choosing what feels right, even when it looks wrong to others. It means saying no to what depletes you, even if it disappoints someone. It means taking the path that doesn't guarantee success, but honors your peace. And that takes courage, because no one claps for invisible victories. No one celebrates when you choose rest over burnout, boundaries over approval, truth over comfort. But you will feel it in your breath, in your sleep, in your skin. Control exhausts you. Alignment restores you. Controlled actions feel tight, anxious, full of pressure. Aligned actions feel clean, quietly powerful. They don't need justification. They carry their own weight. And when you live this way, when you stop moving from panic and start moving from presence, the world responds differently. Not immediately, but unmistakably. You attract better conversations. You meet people who see you without needing to fix you. You feel supported in ways you didn't know were possible. Not because everything's perfect, but because you're no longer betraying yourself to make it so. And maybe that's the point. Maybe the life you're chasing isn't something you build through force, but something that begins to build itself when you stop interfering. Maybe what you've been calling delay was actually protection. What you've called failure was redirection. And what you've been trying so hard to control was already trying to find its way to you. You don't need to be louder. You don't need to try harder. You don't need to force the timing or the outcome or the understanding of others. What you need is to trust yourself, to trust the intelligence within you that knows when something feels off, that knows when to walk away, that knows when to pause, when to rest, when to leap. You've spent so long gripping life with clenched fists. Now try opening your hands. Let what wants to stay, stay. Let what wants to leave, go. Let what wants to find you, because it will. Not when you chase it, but when you're ready to receive it.